No fences, no guard tower, or, no cottages, so nothing. Nothing looks familiar. No front gate. Didn't leave anything.
Art Shibayama was just 13 years old and living comfortably in Peru when he was forced out of the only home he had ever known. During World War II, the United States government, in collaboration with several Latin American countries, orchestrated the forced removal and internment of over 2,000 persons of Japanese ancestry, which included both citizens of 13 Latin American countries as well as Japanese immigrants. Like young Art Shibayama, the vast majority were Japanese Peruvians. Shortly after the Japanese military attack on Pearl Harbor, community leaders were scapegoated and rounded up for detention throughout the Americas. In Peru, a blacklist had been generated. While not based on any real or credible evidence of Japanese subversive activity, the blacklist targeted businessmen, community leaders, and educators. In collaboration with Peruvian officials, the U.S. used the blacklist as the basis for rounding up hostages. These hostages were then to be traded for Americans held by Japan. With Peru's full cooperation, the kidnappings began.
Every time U.S. transport came into the Port of Callao, words got around and people, the head of the families, went into hiding. My father included. When the police came to our house several times looking for him, and the last time, again, not finding him, they took my mother and put her in jail. My sister, who was 11 at the time, went with her because she didn't want our mother to go by herself. As soon as my father found out about it, he came out. He gave himself up.
Aboard U.S. Army transports, they were taken. For weeks, Art was stuck below deck, shipped off with his family to an unknown destination and an uncertain future.
After 21 days, we arrived in New Orleans, and the women and children were let off the ship first and marched to a warehouse, and they were ordered to strip and stand in line naked. My sister, who was 11 at that time, said that she never felt so humiliated that she had to strip in front of boys.
Most of the Japanese Latin Americans were interned in a Department of Justice camp at Crystal City, Texas. A 10-foot fence, guard towers, and floodlights surrounded this camp. The camp also held persons of Italian and German ancestry from the United States and Latin America, as well as Japanese Americans. During the internment, over 800 Japanese Latin Americans were included in 2 prisoner exchanges, which set sail from New York. Those who were not exchanged remained confined in Department of Justice camps until the end of the war.
And in Chicago, more than 1 million sing and dance in the streets in the biggest celebration the Windy City has ever seen. Joy is unconfined.
But for Art and the other internees, their long ordeal did not end with the close of World War II. The remaining Japanese Latin Americans were told that they were illegal aliens and would be deported. And because the Latin American governments initially refused to allow these internees to return, over 1,000 were thus deported to war-devastated Japan. Meanwhile, as the camps were closing, Art's family, along with a few hundred others, were determined not to share the same fate as those who had been deported. With the help of attorney Wayne Collins, they fought the deportation and were paroled to work in Seabrook Farms, a vegetable processing plant in New Jersey.
After we went to Seabrook, my father couldn't feed a family of 8 because my mother was pregnant. She couldn't work, so my sister and I had to go to work. So I never went to school again.
Still fighting deportation, many families decided to settle in the United States as they saw no hope in ever returning home. For Art's family, this meant resettling in Chicago. Art brought his family out to California and started his own service station in San Jose, where he eventually retired. And though World War II had long since ended, for Art and the former internees, their long struggle would not fade with retirement.
The legislation that I am about to sign provides for a restitution payment to each of the 60,000 survivors, surviving Japanese Americans, of the 120,000 who were relocated or detained. Yet no payment can make up for those lost years. So what is most important in this bill has less to do with property than with honor. For here we admit a wrong. Here we reaffirm our commitment as a nation to equal justice under the law.
However, Art was denied justice. Under this law, Japanese Latin Americans were deemed ineligible for redress as they were not U.S. citizens or residents at the time of internment. In an effort to call attention to their hidden history and to support efforts for redress, the Campaign for Justice was formed.
The Campaign for Justice started in 1996, and it was founded by individuals and organizations who wanted to seek redress for Japanese Latin Americans. It was founded during the time of the Mochizuki lawsuit when that was filed, which sought to get redress for Japanese Latin Americans who were denied under the Civil Liberties Act.
In response to public pressure, the Department of Justice offered a settlement of only $5,000 each, just 1/4 of the $20,000 redress provided to the Japanese Americans.
I wanted to get the equal justice. I wanted to regain the dignity for my parents.
While supporting the decision of those who accepted the settlement, Art Shibayama, along with several others, chose to opt out of the settlement. He then filed his own lawsuit, preferring to fight for both redress and a full disclosure of the violations committed by the United States during World War II. Despite his efforts, Art was once again denied justice. His case was dismissed in the final months of 2002.
You know, it's not like we wanted to come here. We didn't want to come here. We were forced to come here. We were brought here by the government. So how can that be illegal? That don't make sense.
Ese es el punto. Ese es el punto que tienen que reconocer. Que si quieren ser justos, que sean justos con todo y que reconozcan sus errores.
Until the crime is over, meaning it has been fully acknowledged and fully compensated, it is ongoing.